Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Our learning objectives are pretty straightforward today. We're going to start with articulating the relationship between grief, loss, and dementia, which is a relationship many people don't fully appreciate. We're also going to take some time to appreciate the care partner experience, and Heather is going to be sharing a lot with you about what it means to be a care partner to a person living with dementia. And lastly, we want to make sure that you know that the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia is here to help. We have a strong role supporting people living with dementia, as well as all the family and friends surrounding that person. It takes a team to support a person living with dementia. And we'll share a little bit with you before the end of our session today on how we can help. Thank you, Esther. Here's a poll that we'd like to just kind of get a sense of your knowledge on today's topic. We'd like to know who's in the room. It takes a second or two for this to click in, but once people have pressed the submit button on the bottom right of the poll, we will be able to share the results with you on the screen. Okay, thank you. So we've got 72% of folks in the room today who think they're somewhat knowledgeable about dementia, grief, and loss. And that's fantastic because we don't do a lot of education about living with dementia in this session. We're really focused on the caregiver experience of grief and loss. So I think we have the perfect audience today. Everyone will learn something. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you. So, of course, this is a picture of me and my mom, Gloria, and just shows the close, loving relationship that we had. Next. And this is a photo of me and my husband, Gary. And this is important because he is part of the story, not only as a support for me as a caregiver, but also um, I caregave for Gary, and um, uh, that also informs part of my presentation today. It's also a picture of when we were both really healthy, and it makes me happy. And this picture is a picture of the Three Musketeers, um, Gary, Mum, and I at a Christmas luncheon in Ashcroft, where we lived previously. So I never imagined while growing up that my mom, Gloria, would leave such a lasting legacy and a blueprint on how to continue to lead a meaningful life after trauma and loss. Mom excelled at everything she tried: academics and sports in her earlier years, marriage, building a successful business with my dad, volunteering. In fact, in 2008, she won the Kashiro Cup, which is given annually to Burnaby's Citizen of the Year. She was a strong, independent, smart, and beautiful woman, and she died of heart failure March 24th, 2020. Woven into my mother's story is my late husband, Gary. Together, for a short 11 years, his love and support carried me through my Alzheimer's journey. Gary and Mum had a special bond, and during our marriage, Gary survived a late hepatitis C diagnosis resulting in a liver transplant and an aggressive lung cancer that took him on July 4th, 2022. My father, Neil, died in 1993, leaving Mom widowed at 57. I was widowed at 59, and little did I know in the early 90s that supporting my mom through her grief journey would save me literally 30 years later when I was trying to navigate my own. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Heather. So before we dive further into Heather's story, we're just going to talk a little bit about grief, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So what is grief? So grief is the anguish experienced after a loss, and it involves many emotions. It's complex. And we're going to talk about some of the complexity of that today. It's not one moment, it's many. It's a myriad of emotions that can disrupt our entire life, our sense of self, and our entire well-being. So, why are we talking today about the connection between dementia and grief? Well, these two experiences are very linked. The dementia journey, first of all, is full of unknowns from the moment the symptoms start to become noticeable. So, those affected by dementia may notice it, or the family and friends may notice it as well. Everyone starts to experience uncertainty. It begins with the feeling that something's off, something's not quite right prior to a diagnosis. Then a diagnosis will probably follow for most people. And then there's that great big, well, what now? What does this mean for us? What about our retirement plans? What about the kids? What about our entire lifestyle? What about our finances? So everything's thrown up in the air. It's a scary, scary time because the
Yep.
future is so uncertain. All those life plans, all those hopes and dreams, often hopes and dreams associated with a happy retirement, come to a sudden and scary halt, and nothing will be the same from that point forward. The uncertainty affects every aspect of life, social lives, friends, home, healthcare services, and the constant changes that are brought on by ongoing progressive brain damage. So dementia starts small, it gets bigger over time. You don't know how fast it will happen. You don't know the exact symptoms that are going to come. Not knowing when another loss will come can be draining. People affected by dementia find themselves looking back to what their old normal was and wondering if they will ever feel normal again. Dementia means that everyone lives in a state of perpetual change, perpetual loss. And so there is tremendous grief. Grief is universal because when we experience a loss, we then experience grief. And it's not like that grief goes anywhere, it walks with us through the entire dementia journey. In a marathon of change, living with dementia and the constant grief in various forms. A care partner and a person living with dementia will find themselves in constant grief. It's universal because it is a normal and necessary response to any loss, both big and small. So grief is part of being human. You may feel grief when you first hear the diagnosis or when you see changes in a family member or friend. Even if you're at a place of acceptance about dementia, grief will be there. When the losses start to happen and accumulate, they can begin to overflow into other areas. So there may be physical changes such as low energy, feeling weak or worn out, poor sleep patterns, changes in appetite, nausea, physical pain, and discomfort. There's also the psychological symptoms of grief that we have to consider here. So these could be poor concentration, forgetfulness, or impatience. Then we think about grief expressed through a variety of emotions. Sometimes it's mistaken for depression, but depression and grief can coexist. There's the social aspects of grief. Some people choose to withdraw from others. They don't have the energy or the interest anymore in socializing and connecting. They become isolated. They may react to situations differently and out of character. Some people will experience personality changes through their grief. Then we consider spiritual. Some people will process grief through spiritual practices like prayer, contemplation, and more. And I know Heather will talk to us a little bit about how she learned to process her grief. Thanks, Heather.
Anticipatory grief occurs before the loss and can provide time to process the reality of the impending loss. So, while Mom's initial diagnosis in 2013 was hard to process for both of us, my first real sense of grief happened a short time later when we were in a cardiologist's office. We were there to discuss getting a pacemaker for Mom's atrial fibrillation, her irregular heartbeat. So while the cardiologist asked Mom if she wanted to proceed with a pacemaker, she said, "No, thank you." My head whipped around and to look at her, and the doctor asked why. And she replied, "I have Alzheimer's disease. Why would I want to prolong my life?" Suddenly reality set in. I was going to lose my mother. Next slide. Oh, ambiguous grief is defined as when a person is physically present but not emotionally present in the same way. So on my 53rd birthday, Gary and I went to pick up Mom to go to a special birthday dinner that he had arranged. And when we arrived to pick Mom up, she was still in her pajamas and her curlers. And she was surprised to see us and told us that she didn't feel like going out. So with a quick kiss, we left, and I burst into tears, and I was sad for the rest of the night. Mama had forgotten my birthday. I woke up the next morning to two almost identical emails, one sent before she went to bed and the other when she woke up in the morning. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me for sure, but even more so for Mom. So I'm going to share a part of the emails to illustrate her own feelings about the situation, including her own grief. So on the slide, there's some quotes from the two emails, but just to illustrate Mom's feelings about doing it, she said to me, "I am the world's biggest jerk. I am the worst mother. Please forgive me. I cannot forgive myself. I can't stop crying. Just put me in a home and forget about me. I'm totally useless at this stage of my life." Sorry, this is hard. So this came from a woman who I shared with you at the very beginning was a strong, intelligent, capable person who was shattered by the diagnosis and what it was doing to her ability to function. So disenfranchised grief is described as grief that is not openly shared. And I guess first I'd like to thank all of you for hearing and sharing in my grief journey. Every time I revisit it, it helps me to heal. And helping others on their own journey is the healing balm that I need to recover. So while it's hard, it brings me a sense of relief. Despite my husband and friends' support, no one really understood my grief and pain. Even at Alzheimer's BC caregiver support meetings, participants open up and share or sit quietly to meet their own needs. As time went on, my own behavior became erratic and at times irrational. I could feel myself spinning with nothing to grab onto except sleep, which just to be unconscious and away from Alzheimer's and grief for a while. One of the reasons I've chosen to share our story so openly is in an effort to reduce the stigma and normalize the discussion about dementia, death, and dying. I don't think we talk about it enough, and to make changes in perceptions about death and dying in particular, I think the only way it's going to be create change is to discuss it. Earlier in the pre-meeting, I was talking about how people often forget that. They always ask about how your person is, but they very seldom think about the effect that it's having on the caregiver or the family. Okay. We don't always recognize grief. It's a slow, in our case, it was a slow progression. So the effects of the journey towards burnout was sort of unrecognizable for me. And it showed up for me in physical fatigue, emotional changes, and changes in my behavior. I didn't notice my own deterioration until March of 2019. Okay, this is what caregiver burnout looks like. So in March of 2019, I finally took a break and went to Bali for a month with a friend. And she took a picture of me on the left. And I was horrified at my parents because I just was not aware that that had happened to me. And so the picture on the right is the after picture, after spending a month just taking care of myself, eating properly, sleeping better, exercising. And I didn't phone home once. So I had no idea what was going on. So I was free and was able to regain part of my health. Now, unfortunately, the minute I got home, of course, I reverted to my I'll call it bad behavior. But my former way of not dealing with taking care of myself. So that was, there was a journey back to the picture on the left, unfortunately. So when I returned home, instead of establishing new routines, quickly returned to the old ones. So my sleep was poor. I constantly felt tired. Every time I got up to go to the bathroom in the night, I went to the fridge and put something in my mouth. I was irritable, sad, and angry. These emotions cycled through every day. I failed to care for myself. And after Mom's death, I was emotionally paralyzed and exhausted. And I spent the next 4 months alone in nature, sitting and staring at the Shuswap River, trying to process life without her and Alzheimer's disease, because it becomes so all-encompassing that suddenly it's not there anymore. And you're left with all of these feelings and grief and literally no purpose. Then when Gary was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer 9 months after Mom died, I knew I had no choice but to do things differently. When Gary's daughters asked what they could do for their father, I said I was supporting their father and that I needed them to support me. And they did this by traveling from the lower mainland to our home in Ashcroft and spending the weekend with their dad. So I had respite time to go away and breathe. I discovered a beautiful Airbnb in Hope that provided the serene space I needed. It was only 2 hours away. So if something happened, I could, rush home. But it was far enough away that, and so different from being in Ashcroft that it really did provide a break. Then, when we were living at the Cancer Lodge in Vancouver, a previous commitment I had made to my family came up. So instead of canceling, I told Gary's family that I was leaving for 2 weeks and that they had to set up a schedule of daily visits and phone calls. And they did that. And they later told me how much they appreciated the opportunity to step up for us. They said that my capable care and presence with their dad gave them an excuse to uh, not take part. So they really appreciated that extra time with their dad. But it also informed Gary and I about, we had thought, about ultimately hospice care. And we were planning on doing it in the lower mainland because it would be easier for the kids. And this experience, when I went away for 2 weeks, showed us that really it wasn't about what was best for the kids. It was what was best for him and I. And so we found a place in Vernon. And the kids came up twice, including the weekend before he died. They had quality time with their dad. And so it worked out better for the whole family. This slide that you're seeing, what on earth is this slide you're saying? So one of the things that I started to do, I have a creative side, and I lost it over time because there was no time to tap into that part of myself. And so I started doing small diamond art projects, and I began coloring. And these activities completely took my mind away from caregiving and provided me with brief periods of respite. So this is a coaster. Each one took me an hour. So focusing on these tiny dots took me out of my brain. I also began a schedule of regular massage therapy sessions in an effort to address the amount of tension and stress in my body. And thanks to good friends, when Gary was in Vancouver General Hospital, so thanks to friends, I started going to Vancouver Whitecaps games. And there we go. And there is nothing better than yelling and screaming at the top of your voice to relieve pent-up emotions that have nowhere else to go. And it also built a beautiful new relationship of friends, soccer friends. So I highly recommend it. It doesn't have to be soccer. Baseball is also excellent. Hockey is very good. So that was part of my self-care. I also began each day just with a brief gratitude acknowledgement. So on dark days, I needed these moments to remind myself that there were many things outside of this journey to be grateful for. And things like my morning cup of coffee, a sweet kiss, and just reminding yourself that you're doing the best you can with what you have. And one of the things that positive things that came out of this for me is I've struggled with self-worth my whole life, but I now know that I was the best daughter and the best wife. And I get to live with that for the rest of my life. And I'm very grateful for that. I still have bad days, but find now that I can sit with my grief. I'm not afraid of my grief. I acknowledge that it's always going to be there, but that I am rebuilding a wonderful life around the grief. Um, in hindsight, what would I do differently? I would talk openly about your journey. So many others have traveled similar ones and can offer you support and lived experience. Um, my mother didn't want anybody to know she had Alzheimer's disease, and so I didn't share it um, outside of a small group of friends. But the longer it went on, I had to dishonor that and talk about it because it was such a big part of my life as well. Uh, to involve family members for respite, tell them what you need. Don't ask them, tell them. Remember your relationship before caregiving. Be their child, be their spouse, be their sibling. I lost so much time in caregiving that I forgot to be my mother's daughter. And ironically, the one part of herself that she never let go of was motherhood. She was, it was important to her for me to remember that she was my mother. Um, to acknowledge and accept your grief, to learn to live in it. Don't feel guilty for your feelings. They are real. And finally, I found out the hard way that because I took on the care of mom and didn't use any support services available in the community, that mom was not eligible for public long-term care. I was upset. It felt like we were being punished for not utilizing an already understaffed and inconsistent service. I thought I was doing the system a favor. And I also, of course, wanted to do my best by my mom. So I had to move mom into private care in another community that was an hour away down a treacherous interior highway. So one of the things that I recommend is just making sure you have a conversation about this early with your community health nurses who are a fantastic support.
I'm going to jump in here now. So thank you so much for listening. And Heather, thank you for sharing your story. It is not easy, I know, for you to share your story, but you and I have both discussed the value of sharing your experiences and helping others understand the grief journey as you walked alongside your mom and alongside your husband, Gary. So thank you for sharing, Heather, and thank you to the audience. It's it's a journey we would love to discuss with you, and we really welcome your thoughts and questions here. I understand the chat box is open, and the team is going to start to facilitate a discussion about this. But before we do, I just want to tell you a little bit about what the Alzheimer's Society does. We are an organization called the Alzheimer's Society, but ironically, we are here for much more than Alzheimer's. We are here for anybody who wants to learn more about any kind of dementia. So this would mean if somebody had a stroke and there's cognitive changes after a stroke, what's commonly referred to as vascular dementia. If somebody is experiencing dementia associated with Parkinson's disease or Lewy body or frontal temporal, we are here for you. We're here for the person who's been diagnosed. We have support groups. We have education. We have phone line discussions available to you. We have the helpline, which is on the slide. We're here for care partners who need a tremendous amount, as Heather was talking about, a tremendous amount of information, but also education to be prepared. Heather's story about being limited in long-term care access is a good reminder that you need to understand the healthcare system when you're supporting someone living with dementia. And we are here to help you do that. We'll actually prepare you for a meeting with the nurse. We'll discuss your options so that you can go in to those discussions well informed and ready to build a plan. So the phone numbers on the screen, we have English, Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, Cantonese, and Mandarin. These are all toll-free across British Columbia. Please give us a call. If you're a healthcare provider on this webinar today, you can actually refer clients, residents, patients to us, which means we'll call them and start the conversation because most care partners are overwhelmed, and so they appreciate us taking that initiative. I think we have another poll coming up.
Numbers are coming in somewhat, and a lot of people have said that just this 35 minutes has increased their knowledge of the topic, and I think that's amazing. That's what we want to hear, and that's why we do this. Um, and so I'm really happy that, Susan and Heather, that you're able to really do that and share some of your stories. I know there's more that you probably could share, but it's nice how you fit that in. And so this is a great point for people who have questions. If they're a care provider or if there's, helping someone else, if you have any questions for Susan or Heather on anything that you want to know. And we have about 15 minutes left to be able to hear your questions or any of your comments. So please raise your Zoom hand, or you could write it in the chat. As people gather their thoughts and some of the questions that they have, as I was saying before, my grandma has dementia. And I remember the first time someone told me, I'm like, okay, yeah, but I didn't understand what that actually meant until I first actually went and saw her uh, in Ontario. And I thought, oh, she'll remember me, like like I'll break through the gap of whatever is going on. Like we had a really special connection. And, you go in there and she did not remember me. And I was
Wow.
so sad. And I could barely sit in front of her. Honestly, I wanted to leave and I cried and it was really hard for me. And then when I left, I was like, how am I supposed to work through this? Like, how am I supposed to connect with her now that she doesn't remember who I am? And it's a good question. Like for me, what I did was I had like some time away. And then when I came back to Ontario again, I was, I think, more prepared for it. But for Susan and Heather, do you get this a lot where that first interaction and like how do you tell people, how to deal with those emotions that, just come up right in the beginning where it's like the first time they realize that this is the reality and that, the memories are of you are are going.
Yeah, I was just momentarily distracted by one of the questions that came up. It was, I just living in a small community. Ashcroft has 1,700 people, and living in a small community really helped because it allowed mom to stay in her own home for longer. Before she moved to Ashcroft from the Lower Mainland, I went around to every business, which is maybe 10, and talked to my friends at each place and told them that my mom was moving to Ashcroft, that she had Alzheimer's. And, could they just let me know if they felt that anything was off? So I knew that there were eyes on her. And I did get calls now and then about things. And so I was very grateful that she, moved from Burnaby to a smaller community where we were because that was super helpful. Did you want me to answer? Was it Nicholas's question?
Yeah, we have a couple in the chat, so if you want to answer any of
Okay.
those, yeah.
Um, so there was a question about clarifying the public care. So I think it's still the same now, but this was 5 years ago. There's a rule, a procedure, maybe, yeah, that says that if you do not exhaust all available community health care for your person, they are not eligible for public long-term care. So I advise my friends now to make sure that they have Better at Home come in and, do some cleaning, that they perhaps have volunteer visitors come in, that, uh, even though you're capable of doing their medication management, have a healthcare aide come in and do that, um, so that when it's time to go into long-term care, you can say that you have exhausted the resources in the community, and then they will be eligible to go into public care. So to me, it didn't make a lot of sense because I did feel that I was helping the system by not needing. But that was why.
I'd like to add that Heather's experience, we've got lots of clients at the Alzheimer's Society who are trying to better understand this process, because what Heather went through is unforgivable. It's really, really hard. My experience was different with the healthcare system. So there's many different health authorities, and it really depends on being prepared for those conversations and who you're working with and what your community has. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to the Alzheimer's Society, especially when it's for a person living with dementia. It's a different journey, because we don't want you to experience what Heather experienced. So please work with us. We'd be delighted to kind of prepare you and help you do your planning.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so we have another question. How do we refer individuals and families to the BC Alzheimer's Society?
That's my favorite question. So, I believe that Esther has a handout for the chat box of further learning. So I would just want to make sure that that gets into the chat box. And if you are interested in referring, I'm actually going to show you how to do that.
You can also self-refer.
Yep, you can also self-refer. Okay, here we are. Can I share my screen again, Joshua? Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay.
Great, here we go. I want everybody to see the website. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So this is the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia right here. You'll see there are different websites for different provinces. And there's also a website for the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. So I want to make sure that you go to Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia right here. We have massive amounts of information about dementia, how to get help and support, even for different professionals. If you're a healthcare provider, you can click on I'm a healthcare provider, and there's all this here just for you. At the bottom here, it's making a referral. So you click on that. This page, I'll put this link in the chat, will walk you through the very simple process of making a referral. It's a form, it takes 5 minutes. And then we reach out to the person in about, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks max. We follow your instructions for the referral, and we let you know how it's gone. We let you know whether the referral was successful or not. Straightforward. And you can call the helpline, which is on the handout that Esther is going to share. And you can also ask them to send you the referral form as well, and they will take care of that for you. I've just put the link into the chat.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for doing that. And there's a lot of comments, so you might need some time after this end to review them all. But does anyone else have any questions that they want to share, or comments that they want to share before we begin to end? I have one question that came up to me recently, and it's as a care provider, if the person living with dementia talks about someone who has died, do you want to discuss that with them and bring it up each time for them to grieve, or is it recommended to pretend that they're just not there?
Mm. Heather,
Can
did that
Susan,
happen to
can I?
you? Yeah, you lead off. I'll follow.
Yeah. So, I've actually talked to people about this, and one of the things that I learned from my caregiver support group was little white lies are okay. And is it a little white lie to avoid reminding someone every day that their spouse died? Maybe not, but what I would do is my little white lie would be, oh, he's just out right now. And then I would change the subject and she would forget her question. And so we would move on. Reminding someone every day that the person they love most is gone um, forces them to that grief place immediately, like, oh my God, my husband's dead. And all of what you can imagine that would bring up for them. So little white lies and then diversion, changing the subject is what worked best for me.
I agree with Heather. We have a concept we teach in all of our caregiver education. It's called connect, don't correct. Dementia is brain damage. The brain is losing power. It's shrinking. It's getting smaller. There's holes in the brain. Um, so you have to remember that what you give that brain as far as information, facts, emotional connection, everything you give that brain, you have to ask yourself, can the brain handle it? And if the brain takes in this information, what will happen? And if you are sharing information that is causing that brain more stress, confusion, moments of grief, loss, and depression, you you have to think twice. Is it worth it? And what am I accomplishing by actually sharing this information? And so when Heather uses the word little white lies, it's kind of like, well, it's a judgment call that you are in the unfortunate position of having to decide what is appropriate to share and what is not, and having to anticipate the amount of damage that information will cause. Grief is not always based on facts, right? Do you have to share the facts that somebody is gone if that's going to hurt the person over and over again and they're going to keep forgetting? What would happen if you started to share memories? I love it when dad does this. I remember grandma here. What would happen if you created a moment where you could actually bond and discuss how much you love a person without actually discussing their death? Could that be a healthier form of grieving for a person living with dementia who keeps forgetting the facts? They're not forgetting the emotions, they're not forgetting the connections, they're just forgetting the facts. Therapeutic fibs. Barb, you've named it.
I
Yep,
love it. Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And you were talking, Joshua, about, trying to have a conversation with your grandmother when she didn't remember who you were. And it became more and more difficult to have conversations with my mom because she didn't remember things in the day to day. And so what I started to do was, I'd come over for a visit and I'd say, can you tell me again about that time that you and Uncle Tony set the farmer's field on fire? Something from like way back that I already knew the story. But she could remember that. And she would tell it. And as time went on, the story changed because that was how it was in her mind. But it didn't matter whether it was right or not. we were engaged in a conversation, and she loved looking at old pictures that reminded her of things. Anything from the past made her happy. And so if you don't know what to talk about, just pick something that you already know and just ask them to tell you about it.
That's a great strategy. I like that. Which allows you to just be more also comfortable because one of the awkwardness is what do I talk about then? And so
Yeah.
that's such a great strategy. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions and comments. And thank you, Heather and Susan, just for your time today and taking it to raise awareness on this issue and helping us as we maneuver this ourselves or as we care for others who are. And so we hope that everyone enjoyed the session, and we ask that you complete a short survey that pops up when you leave this meeting. And so registration for the next session in this series is titled Exploring the Power of Equine Therapy in Grief Support. And that's scheduled for June 26th at noon. And you sort of see that link in the chat. And so to be notified of any other sessions, feel free to join or subscribe to our newsletter at the BC Center for Palliative Care. And our aim is to provide you a copy of this recording, any summary notes, and any kind of resources that we shared in the chat or other resources that we know about within 7 working days. And so once again, thank you everyone, and especially, Heather, for sharing so vulnerably your story. Always find that those stories hit me in the heart the most. And that's why I really appreciate when people with lived experience come on here and share. So thank you again for really giving us a window into your grief and how you're coping today.
It was my pleasure, really. It helps me a lot.
So it works both ways. You're
Yeah.
helping us, we're helping you. I love that. All right, we hope everyone has a good rest of the day.